What's up, amigos? It's the Project Maker Minute with yours truly, Chris Lewitt. As you may know, I'm the former #1 for Cornell University, pro circuit player, elite junior development coach, and author and educator, author of The Secrets of Spanish Tennis and the Tennis Technique Bible. On this Project Maker Minute, we've been talking recently about instruction and coaching. And I want to point out to you guys that I think it's a mistake to start a practice and always do drills first and do technique first and do things from the basket first, basically dead ball drills. That's a very classic way to begin a practice, like a group practice or even a lesson. And I think in a lot of ways we should reconsider that and reimagine that, revisualize that, and think about actually starting group classes and lessons with point play and with competition and with something that gets the energy going and something um, that creates engagement, and also something that allows the coach to evaluate players in the environment when they're competing, which reveals a lot more about a player than just how they perform a drill. So I think it's just a sort of a classic mistake that I see a lot of coaches doing. I like to observe other coaches as they work. I find it fascinating to watch how coaches structure their lessons and how they interact with students and how they engage with players, and basically how they coach. I'm fascinated by different coaching styles and different coaching approaches, and I like to analyze those types of things when I'm not actually coaching my own kids. So think about that, guys. If you're a coach or if you're a parent, you've got a student or son or daughter taking lessons. I I relate it to martial arts because I still do a lot of martial arts. I train regularly, for example, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I do a lot of boxing. So in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, traditionally in that world, in that culture, you come to a class, you do some drills, you do like exercise of the day or technique of the day, and then at the end of the class, you roll, which is like a form of sparring. And I think that that is flawed in many ways because a lot of times in the beginning of class, that type of that way to start a class doesn't engage the player, the student. And in the same way as for tennis, you come to a class and then the coach is like, all right, we're gonna do this drill, we're gonna do that drill, and everyone's just like, nobody wants to do that. I mean, maybe you get an occasional kid who wants to do that, but most kids don't want to just do some random drill at the beginning of practice. Or for example, when you have a new player, new athlete, and the player comes and you want to evaluate that athlete, don't start by evaluating them with like racket fed drills or hand fed drills or some type of very very structured drill. The best way to evaluate a player is to play with them or to watch them play points with someone else. Even baseline points don't reveal as much as like someone playing a set or someone playing points with serve and return. That's the best way to evaluate a player's ability. So I find it funny that players come for an evaluation and the coach rolls out the big cart and starts feeding them balls to evaluate them, and that just gives you a poor reflection of what the player actually can do. Maybe the player is much better at points. Maybe the player's very good tactically. Maybe the player doesn't look so good, but when they start competing, they're an animal and they have a talent for that. So I just think in a lot of ways, it's better to sometimes flip flop practices, flip flop um, lessons, even private lessons, and just play with a kid from the beginning or do some sort of modified play where you put them in an open environment, look at their decision making, look at how they compete, look at some of the intangibles and X factors rather than just, rolling up the cart and starting to feed a drill, say, hey, we're going to do this drill. And maybe the kids don't like drilling. And at the beginning of the lesson, you already sort of shut down their motivation, their engagement. You sort of dampen their fire from the very start. You don't even realize it yet. I think that happens with a lot of coaches during their lessons. And so it's the same thing in martial arts. So I think the really interesting martial arts class is like when you come, maybe you spar first, and the coach evaluates how good a fighter you are, and then after you've done your live sparring, you're playing in tennis terms, the coach says, okay, hey, I noticed this, hey, let's drill this, let's work on this, I saw how you compete, and now I have a lot of insight into how to structure better drills for you. But in tennis and also in martial arts, we do it the opposite. A lot of times we do it the opposite way around, where we just do some sort of random exercise and we make a judgment about a player that may or may not be accurate. And then maybe after all said and done, we just play some points at the end. But the information that I really want to know is from those points. And to me, that's where the best information is going to come. And then that can be the jumping off point to structure drills and do certain exercises. And then you can have the player, you can sort of convince the player that it's really important to do those exercises because you just played with the player, you just saw them play, and you can say, hey, I noticed you had trouble with that. Let's work on XYZ, or let's work on ABC. And the player it will make sense to the player. And in some ways that is kind of a games-based approach to coaching, but I think it's useful to sometimes structure a class or a lesson that way. And I oftentimes just see, I see many coaches who never even consider that. They just do it the way they learned or the way they were taught in some USPTA or PTR course, or how their tennis director tells them to do it. And just think about sometimes flipping it on its head. And parents sometimes look for that too for your kid. Maybe look for classes that are run a little differently, and you might get something better out of that. Guys, if you enjoyed this Project Maker Minute, please consider watching my big show, The Project Maker Show. We're going to have some new shows coming out soon. Also, please consider subscribing to our channel. I consider this a place for intelligent, cerebral tennis minds, people who are interested in junior development and Spanish tennis and technical development, things of that nature. So if you're into that kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to our small and growing channel. Thank you, guys. See you on the next program.